Today, we honor you, the men and women who have given 30 plus and more years of your lives in service to Breezes, to our hospitality industry, and most importantly, to our country. When I look around this room, I do not just see long-serving employees. I see ambassadors of the Bahamas. For 3 decades, each of you has been carrying the story of our nation to the world. One smile, one conversation, one act of kindness at a time. As Prime Minister, I will always stand on the side of the Bahamian workers. Our policies, our investments, our decisions, they are guided by a belief that when we strengthen our workers, we strengthen our nation. Hurricane Dorian swept through our islands with a force unmatched in our lifetime. It left behind grief. It left behind destruction. It left behind memories that continue to weigh on our hearts. We pause today to remember those whose lives were taken, mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, grandparents and children, families that were never able to come back together again. Their names, their faces, and their stories remain with us, carried in the hearts of loved ones and in the collective memory of our nation. We remember the survivors. Many lived through days of fear and uncertainty, clinging to rooftops, wading through rising waters, searching desperately for missing relatives. They endured the unimaginable and then faced the challenge of starting again with little left to call their own. Their courage is a reminder that even in the most difficult of times, the Bahamian spirit refuses to bend.
The Office of the Prime Minister Press Office is the primary liaison between the Fourth Estate and the Office of the Prime Minister and Cabinet.
Every day, we are working to build a more inclusive economy and a stronger, safer country.
Hear all of the latest developments as the Davis administration carries out the broad mandate of progress and change. Our live weekly press briefings provide full access to current newsmakers on the most topical issues of the day. We facilitate prompt responses from cabinet ministers on the latest reports and get answers on the issues that matter to you.
Will any penalties be levied against the
OPM Press Now, keeping you in the know. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Office of the Prime Minister's weekly press briefing. This morning, we're pleased to welcome as our special guest, Minister of National Security, the Honorable Wayne Munro. Mr. Munro will discuss, among other things, this morning, the government's major crime fighting initiative, the Clear Hold Bill initiative, and the impact that it's having in our communities. He will also respond to the Free National Movement's crime plan. What about it may be helpful and what about it may already be in effect by this administration. We'll hear about that. And finally, the minister will also discuss pertaining to the Royal Bahamas Police and Defense Forces, their recruitment drives, which are set to begin, of course, to bolster both the manpower on both forces. So without further ado, welcome the Minister of National Security, the Honorable Wayne Munro.
Thank you, Keesler, and good morning, Bahamas. As I am here to address the issue of crime and responses to it. Before I go directly into that, last evening there was a double homicide in Johnson Alley, which is a part of my constituency, in which one gentleman fitted with an electronic monitoring device was the victim of homicide, and another gentleman was also murdered with an excess of 30 rounds discharged at that site. Firstly, I send out my condolences to the families of the deceased, and that goes without reservation. It does not matter whether you are accused of a crime or whether you are not. Families hurt when their loved ones are killed. That being said, having spoken to persons, this is yet another example that we have to be very careful in this country as to who we associate with and to become a part of the solution. When I was younger, there was a series of books called The Royal Readers, and it contained stories and poems that were to teach life lessons. And there was one about a parrot who was killed while persons were killing crows. And growing up as a young man, my grandparents, my parents, always imposed upon you the lesson of that story from the Royal Readers. And the tagline was, if you were not with the crows found, you would be home safe and sound. There have been many instances of that playing out over the last few years. And so a return to some of the old landmarks may be appropriate. That being said, the Commissioner of Police in a half-year report chronicled what she said, and the statistic shows, were some of the successes of the all of government, all of society approach to tackling the scourge of crime in this country. The Progressive Liberal Party, this Davis administration, has set out its 5-pillar plan for crime, namely prevention, policing, prosecution, punishment, and rehabilitation. That has been pronounced from 2021, and we have earnestly pursued it. At the beginning and the launch of the Anti-Gang and Crime Task Force, the opposition was invited to the table. They attended, pronounced it a PR exercise, and exited. They have recently published in something that saved under something called the F&M Press Kit, what they describe as the F&M's 10-point plan to address crime. I can advise that we have considered it fully. We take very seriously the fact that this is an area that must be an all of society effort, and as they are a part of the society, we will consider any solution advanced by any member of this country. Crime must never be a political football. Having said that, in consideration of their plan, and I will just go through it very quickly before I move on to the Clear Hold Build initiative. Their first assertion is that they would hire more officers. The record shows that in the first 20 months of the Davis administration, this administration hired more police and defense force officers than the previous administration had done in 4.5 years. We've continued on that drive to replace officers. You would have heard by now, over the course of time, the Commissioner of Police indicating that there's a deficiency of officers. You'd have also heard that there's an alarmingly high percentage of police officers and defense force officers unavailable for service due to medical issues. The defense force and police force continue to recruit. There are recruit classes in both organizations. They have not passed out yet, but both organizations are in their recruitment evolution. I would invite all young Bahamians between 18 and 30 who wish a career in either of the forces to step forward for national service. Currently, the police recruitment portal is still open, but it will close tomorrow, Friday. So anyone who has not applied to date is invited to do so by tomorrow, the latest. The Defense Force recruitment will commence next week, and individuals may apply online at the Defense Force's website or obtain an application from Defense Headquarters located at the Sir Orville Turnquest Building on JFK or HMBS Coral Harbor Base in Coral Harbor. If you wish to serve your country, you are invited to apply. They asserted that they will expand frontline policing in high crime areas, add more vehicles, and target guns and drugs. The record again will show that when this administration came to office, we had to immediately purchase 100 patrol vehicles because of the deficiency. We continue to add vehicles. The statistics show that the police have increased seizures of both guns and drugs. By Section 6 of the Police Force Act, the Commissioner of Police is charged with the administration of the Royal Bahamas Police Force, which is supposed to be free of political interference. That is the position of this administration. We have faith in the Commissioner, her senior executive leadership team, the brave men and women of the Royal Bahamas Police Force who carry out their mandate day and night in difficult circumstances. The second proposal was that they would restore trust through transparency by strengthening the investigation commission, introducing independent police appointments for senior leadership, raise higher standards, publish reports and publicize quarterly updates, and ensure no one escapes accountability. One must take it that they are referring to the Independent Commission of Investigation, which was legislated by this administration, which the current leader and his men asserted purpose was better served by a commission of inquiry, not a commission of investigation. We're encouraged to see that they appear to have seen the light and now accept that a independent commission of investigation is the better option in ensuring accountability. The Bahamas should know factually the police publish reports quarterly and at the half-year mark and the end-of-year mark publicly, and meet the press, if I'm not mistaken, at the half-year mark and the end-of-year mark to be questioned on those reports. Factually, that is nothing new. They have also said that they will broaden community policing. by properly resourcing community policing, restore the Bahamas National Neighborhood Watch Council to rebuild trust, gather information, and spot problems early. We invite them to indicate to us at the most convenient time what resources they feel are not committed to community policing. The record will show that this Davis administration has increased resources to community policing compared to what was met in place. The record will also show that the Bahamas Neighborhood Watch Council had no governing documents until they were put in place under this administration, and that body continues to exist, has never stopped existing, is headed by vibrant community leaders, and has a police liaison in the Ministry of National Security, office space in the Ministry of National Security, and the police lead for that is Chief Superintendent Davy Pratt. We invite the opposition to indicate to us how further they suggest that the National Neighborhood Watch Council can be invigorated. They pledge to modernize the force by doing a review covering training, leadership, succession planning, equipment, and standards to ensure it is fit for the future. I am aware that the Commissioner and her executive team have made themselves available to the official opposition for discussions, and they are free to indicate to us the details of what is a generalized statement. They pledge to clear the court backlog by aggressively tackling delays with more virtual court, greater digitization, a modern forensic lab, to expand specialist court and build on international evidence showing drugs and mental health court reduce reoffending. For the edification of the Bahamian people, the ground was broken on a new virtual court at the Bahamas Department of Correction campus. At the point that the ground was broken, the foundation had already been cut. At the ceremony, trucks were already trucking aggregate to go towards the construction, and the projected completion date given at this point is 9 months. The issue of greater digitization, there is an ongoing project that continues. The assertion with regard to modern forensic lab, that has been carried forward. Quinn McCartney chaired the committee when this administration came to office. It is now chaired by Assistant Commissioner of Police Earl Thompson. They have set specifications. An invitation for expression of interest was published on the government's procurement portal. There have been 3 responses to it, and the matter is being moved forward with all the details with regard procurement for a building and the establishment of the career path for the persons who would work in this national forensic lab. We are encouraged that the opposition endorses these steps that are being taken by this administration. There has been and currently is a drug court, and from the 1990s, when I returned from the UK from law school, it was focused on treatment as well as punishment, and it has continued along that line. We invite details of other mental health courts that the opposition feels may be useful. They pledge to update loose laws, and they say that they will strengthen laws to impose tougher sentencing for serious gun and sex crimes, that they will update the Firearms Act to address assault rifles, 3D printed guns, and ghost guns. As a matter of fact, the current Firearms Act criminalizes the possession of assault rifles, which are defined as prohibited weapons in that Firearms Act. 3D printed guns and ghost guns are also covered by the current Firearms Act. The Firearms Act is being modernized for other purposes, as well as prohibiting and seeking to control the components of firearms and 3D printers used to print 3D guns. The public would note that the Anti-Gang Act increased penalties for firearms used in gang-related circumstances, and the public would also be aware that the length of sentences is a matter for the independent judicial branch of government and not the executive branch or legislative branch of government. They pledge to stop abuse of bail by prioritizing appealing and suitable releases in court, improving supervision and protection where bail is granted, and to consider further reform of the Bail Act, including mandatory conditions. The public would be aware that this administration amended the Bail Act to crack down on persons breaching conditions of bail. The public would also be aware from reports that that has been vigorously pursued by the police and prosecution authorities. The public should also be made aware that the previous FNM administration made the Director of Public Prosecution an independent entity to be charged with matters of prosecutions before the court, and so that office will determine which matters are appealed, and that is again a matter for that office. They pledge to break the cycle by expanding rehabilitation and skills training and job placement for low security prisoners, partner with employers to secure work on release, separate first-time youth offenders, support integration, and strengthen services for victims with substantial support for survivors of sexual violence. We're pleased that the opposition endorses the steps taken by this administration in expanding the work release program for persons in custody, for expanding the work opportunities for persons who aren't on the work release program, being supervised by correctional officers. We're pleased that they support that, and we would in fact announce that it is to be further expanded as Inmate Industries is brought online. We're pleased that the FNM endorses the separation of first-time youth offenders. For the first time in this country's history, there is a separate male juvenile detention facility at BDOCS. There will be completed shortly the separate female juvenile detention facility for young ladies at BDOCS. That is projected to be completed before the end of this year. We encourage that the opposition approves of these steps taken by this administration. We note that they also approve the establishment of the Domestic Violence Center by the Royal Bahamas Police Force that integrates support for victims of domestic violence and sexual abuse. We invite them to submit any further details of their plan. They, under Prevent and Protect, they pledge to treat crime like a public health issue. We're pleased that they're in step with the CARICOM declaration that took place 2 years ago that our Prime Minister, the Honorable Philip Edward Brave Davis, has endorsed and that we are applying in this country. The public would be aware that the Ministry of Health recently released a study on young persons that indicates that we are moving forward with this approach. We accept the endorsement of the opposition of these steps that we are taking. Finally, they pledge to revive communities by prioritizing cleanup operations to remove abandoned cars, overgrown areas, and crime hotspots, create jobs for at-risk individuals, turn spaces into community assets, and add CCTV with ongoing police and social service presence. We're pleased that they appear to be endorsing the Clear, Hold, Build initiative of this administration. And that would bring me conveniently to updating you on the progress of the Clear, Hold, Build initiative, which is endorsed by the Free National Movement in their 10-point crime plan. We're currently in the constituencies of Nassau Village and Carmichael. The Clear phase has been completed. The whole phase continues and will continue as we encourage communities to hold the ground that has been cleared in the massive effort by the Royal Bahamas Police Force, the Department of Environmental Health Services, Social Services, the Ministry of Works, and the Ministry of Health. We are entering the build phase, in which there will be surveys done in both communities to gauge the attitude and response of the community to what has taken place. We've held town hall meetings in both communities and are now developing what is referred to as the build phase, which will involve not only job skills upskilling, but will involve initiatives that have been called for by the members of those communities. We stress that to build communities, you must listen to the community. We thank everyone who has participated in the town halls, everyone who continues to participate, and we would encourage everyone to continue to participate. This is a matter of importance to you. In the Carmichael area, it is anticipated that there will be shortly commenced a community center to cater to that community. In Nassau Village, we have already completed their community center. It is in use, and we're pleased to say that the community appears to appreciate that as a space of peace and purpose. And so as we continue onward, the only, and I suppose I wouldn't be me if I didn't in this season say something political, eh? And what I would say is, we are pleased with the endorsement of the Free National Movement, of, on the face of it, everything this administration has done, including the Independent Commission of Investigation. We would just wish that instead of plagiarizing it, they would give attribution. That is how you do it, if you are being intellectually honest. When you use somebody's idea, you just put a footnote. So there should be 10 footnotes in the F&M's crime plan that will say, this is currently being done. this is currently being done times 10. And so I've advised the Commissioner of Police and the Commander Defense Force that at the very least, the efforts seem to have the approbation of the opposition, and that they don't assert anything to be done that is not already being done. And my final word would be, as I constantly say in the House of Assembly, the only difference in this area is that they talk and we do. And with that, Bahamas, as I say, I will end as I began. Yesterday was not a good day in Johnson Alley. In order to avoid more bad days, I would encourage all Bahamians to be aware of your surroundings. Be aware of who you are associating with. And please do assist the police. It may be a matter of life and death for you. So let us please be a part of the all of government, all of society solution to crime. Thank you, and I would take any questions.
Just to go back on the, did you get on the double homicide? You said one of the person for wearing the electronic monitoring device. Based on the information you have in the briefing with police, if you have any, do you know the offense the person was originally on bail for, and why they wanted that electronic monitoring? What the offense was exactly?
That's not part of the briefing the police gave to me. As that took place in a part of my constituency, you may imagine that from last evening to this morning, I've been contacted by persons from Johnson Alley and other areas of the constituency. And I was encouraged that they were contacting me to give me what they would say would be information that they have, that definitely, if it were not in briefings, I would pass on to the police.
You stressed more than once that people should be mindful of the company they keep. Was this a retaliatory killing, as far as you're aware?
What I would say is this: I do not have that from briefings from the police, and so I would be careful before I say that, because all anecdotal information coming to you is not always accurate. The point being made is this, though, and it's often made from different circumstances. If you are aware, and the person does not have to be on an EMD, if you are aware that, as the young people say, somebody is vibing with a bunch of persons, then you should really report it. I saw a troubling brief from the police where a young man presented at the hospital with a gunshot wound. The police attended to question him, and he told them he doesn't need their help, that they will see him again, and he will be locked up. So that is an instance in which that young man clearly is vibing with somebody, clearly has refused official intervention, and the persons who know him should know who he is. And those persons, if they know that he is vibing with somebody, if you are in his company, when that vibe explodes, then you may be an unintentional victim. All of us must become involved in this because persons live amongst us. And so that's why it's important to cooperate with law enforcement officials. If you don't want to go to the police station, there are urban renewal offices that cater to any number of things in the community. And you can go there to seek social assistance. And when they come and walk about, you can assist them with information. And as I say, it may save your life. It's pointless thinking I can sit down knowing that my neighbors are doing foolishness. Never tell the police about it. Never do anything about it. To say it's not my business when they're doing something that may bring something that may become your business to your doorstep. The police requires our assistance, all of our assistance. And yes, we will put up the CCTVs, and we've put up hundreds of them, more than we met. And we're about to put up hundreds more of them. But the most informative thing that can happen is somebody just letting the police know, you may want to check back there. You may want to check this person. And the police will do their job. If you need to do it through Crime Stoppers, which is anonymous, just do it. Because the life you save may be your own, especially if this thing is happening right next door to you.
Was the younger victim wearing the, sorry, was the younger person wearing the device?
Sorry?
Was the younger victim wearing the device?
I didn't calibrate younger or older when they reported to me, because I spent most of my time talking to people from the community. They reported to me based on a unique nickname that the deceased with the EMD has.
You wanted to share it?
I mean, it's well known. He's known as Horny Man.
I know
That's across the community, so I never asked him why he is known as that, but that's what he's known at. When I came there, he was known as that.
I know that you're stressing the issue here of, if you see something, say something, being aware of your surroundings. Recently, the Bahamian public has, speculated about public safety in light of the murder before this being an alleged gang leader, of course, Dorian Neely. And given that, Prime Minister Philip Davis also addressed it, do you believe that this issue of public safety is one in light of that specific murder of national importance?
Every murder is a matter of national importance. As a country, we have limited resources, and the most limited resource we have are our people. So anytime any person is murdered, that is a matter of national importance. From the day that I assumed this office, I think I told y'all from the start, the reason I don't count past one is because one murder is one murder too many. So whether it's a murder of somebody who is a reputed gang leader or somebody who happens to be innocently around, like the grandmother who was murdered in the car when they were coming for her grandson, all of them are matters of national importance. And that is why addressing them is a matter of national importance. So that is why when we say prevention, and the Prime Minister keeps stressing to me and to everyone else that prevention and rehabilitation we're paying more attention to, because prevention is important. Could you imagine if you took the time to look around you and see a young man who may be floundering, a young mother who may have difficulties in raising children, because there is no class for being a parent, eh? Before I had my first child, nobody taught me how to be a father. You may look around and have observations. In the older days, you might have had a yard with 10 homes of persons from the same family with 3 or 4 generations, where the Grammies, the aunties would show the young girls how to be mothers. We don't have that today. We generally live by ourselves. So if you were to pay attention and intervene in the life of one young man who may have gone on to become a criminal, who may have gone on to become a gang leader, you may have affected a big change in this country. So every young man, every young woman you see who is in trouble and you do nothing to assist, don't have to be your child. They can be around your children. So you better pay attention to them. You can't say that ain't my child. So everyone you do not intervene with has the potential to become a problem in your community. And if they become a problem in your community, then they're going to be a problem to everyone. So that is why we are stressing all of society. In the past, the village raised all of its children, not just the ones that belong biologically to you. We're pleased to see the churches are kicking in, because the churches have always been there. They're ramping up their programs to target the family. In fact, in my church, the Anglican diocese, the focus this year is the family. If you go across the spectrum of churches that make up the Christian community, they are focusing on families. But churches are only as vibrant as their members. So the people in the Bahamas who sit down and talk about what the church is doing, go find out by becoming a part of a church so that you yourself can be a part of the work that affects the lives of younger people and therefore your country. This is not a spectator sport. Public safety is not a spectator sport. It is an active engagement that we must all become involved in.
Similar to Linton's question, how concerning is this incident? Because I know the police would have said the perpetrators would have barged into the home to kill these two men and other persons were in the home. I know several weeks ago there was the largest mass shooting with all those persons shot. I think 2 died. Another may have died afterwards. How concerning is this incident now that we can see the societal deterioration, that they're basically going inside persons' homes to target them?
Well, the concern starts from the random nature of their actions. It may be troubling to say that you progress from targeted killings back further in our history, where you would not have an attempt to kill someone if it were in a random situation. You know, when you look at the rules of war, because these young men sometimes consider themselves at war, the killing of innocent civilians purposely is a war crime in that context. In our domestic context, I'm not the director of public prosecutions, but somebody who is randomly killing, that's the equivalent of a war crime. War crimes were described at Nuremberg as the worst offense you could have. And so we have had this deterioration. But again, rather than sit down and spectate on it, these young people who we see going around doing it, and they now range from the age of 15 up, they grew up amongst us. They were born, when they were born, baptized, christened, or whatever. They were that woman's good son. And somewhere along the way, they came at risk. Nobody really attended them. And then they became what they are at 15, able to kill a man. And so rather than sit down and be outraged, that's fine. But after we finish our outrage, let us get up and become involved to stop these young men at risk being taken over to the other side. They will either be with us or they will be with the gangs. And it's up to us to do what we can, the most that we can, to make sure that they're with us.
I know just now you had said, every murder is of national importance, and that's why it's important to address it. So what do you say to persons recently who've been saying that, the details surrounding this investigation and what took place that night and the amount of perpetrators being so scarce in terms of Mr. Neely?
I'm not understanding that question.
So that night at the scene, when we were briefed, right, there were no, usually authorities would say a number of gunmen, they would give a number just like last night when they said it, and then we were questioned about the truck, and there hasn't been any real details yet surrounding what took place that night, even when asking for updates into that investigation. So what would you say, in terms of the details being so scarce, in terms of,
Surely it would depend on surely it would depend on the circumstances, eh? In the Johnson Alley area, there ought to be a number of cameras. In the Johnson Alley area, that's a densely populated area. There will be a number of eyewitnesses who the police can speak to and get information from. I was not in country for the Neely issue and incident, but the impression I got was that it wasn't at an area that was densely populated for people to give eyewitness accounts to the police. I have some idea of where it's said to have taken place. I don't know that there are any numbers of CCTV cameras in that area. The police have many resources that they use to investigate. They will investigate. When they feel that they have information to charge someone, they will charge somebody. At times, they come to the public seeking assistance, and they will give information to solicit assistance. But with regard whether they have at the time they speak to you, if they speak to you and the people from Johnson Alley say, we saw 4 people, then they can tell you that. If they check the 2 sources of our CCTV cameras and they report this is what we saw, then they can assist you with that information if they think it doesn't prejudice their investigation. But there will be some instances in which there will be no eyewitness accounts. There may be some instances where there are no CCTV cameras in that same area so you can see how many people it was. But there may be CCTV cameras that capture the car moving away from this circumstance, and then we can follow the car. So you have to exercise faith that the police will advise the public to the extent that it does not prejudice their investigation and that it does not prejudice a fair trial with information that the public needs.
Regarding police recruitment, are you able to say how many people have applied so far?
No, I cannot. I know that there are people who, what happens is every year there is a recruitment drive. There's a maximum number of recruits that can be housed in the police training college. If that number is filled and there are other persons who are qualified but were not accepted in, they can carry forward. They'd have to apply again, but they can carry forward. Thus far, we've not had a problem with numbers. The problem that we have, and I would appeal again, it's the young men, is the number of young qualified men coming forward for recruitment. I've had occasion in the last recruitment exercise to cancel the Defense Force instructions on their recruitment with regard qualifications, because I found the qualifications were sometimes overly academic and not directed for being fit for purpose. So for an example, they had as their minimum qualification 5 BJCs with English and math. There was a young man with 4 BJCs, English, math, and a certificate for the repair of outboard engines, which should be very useful for the Defense Force, right? But he would not have met the minimum requirement for recruitment because he didn't have the 5th BJC. And mind you, the 5th BJC could be just looking at birds. It doesn't have to be anything in particular. The only 2 particular BJCs you need is English and math. And so we're rationalizing what the recruitment requirements are. The Commander Defense Force and his executive team have indicated that they want to do more targeted recruitment because we need more engineers and specialists in the Defense Force, people who can work on diesel engines, because that's what is in the vessel, work on outboard motors, because that's what powers the safe boats, and work on electrical systems. And so they're going to have targeted recruitment. They had targeted recruitment for reserves for all things chefs, because when these boats go out to sea for 10, 14 days at a time, the most important person on the ship is the chef. And so they are becoming more targeted in their recruitment effort. And I would say that persons don't stereotype the police and defense force. There are opportunities for everyone. If you look across the spectrum of what they do, they have drone operators in all of them. They have IT operators in all of them. If you're more active, you can do active stuff. If you're on the defense force, if you want to see the Bahamas by sea, something you need to be rich to own a yacht to do, you can do that if you wish. So don't stereotype being a police officer or a defense force officer or Marine. There are a lot of opportunities. I encourage you to look at their websites, see what they do, and especially to the young men. And please step forward. If you don't step forward, I don't want to hear you complaining about women taking over. Because if you don't step up, that's what will happen. And there's nothing wrong with that, but we don't want to hear you complaining when you're not participating. So young men, we put out a call for you. Young women as well. You can look at our forces and see that we don't discriminate between men and women. You just have to have the qualifications, the ability to do the job, and the will to do the job. So we're calling out to all young Bahamian men and women between the age of 18 and 30 to consider joining these forces. It will be a rewarding career if you come with the right attitude.
Minister,
I just wanted to
maybe
speak
a
to
police matter, but would the police have given you any, I guess, updates in your briefings on their movement towards charging someone under the anti-gang bill? I think a month or two ago, the commissioner said that there was an additional case that they were looking into, but nothing has been, I guess, concretized this yet.
Well, what I can say is this, and I would have to be guarded in what I say. There are active matters at a point. In my last heads of agency meeting, the police presented me with a request for the consideration of amendment of a particular statute that we will be pursuing with the Office of the Attorney General and the Law Reform Commission. But I am satisfied that they have been diligent in their efforts. And it happened at that meeting with the head of the Anti-Gang and Crime Unit, ACP Raming, who I've known over my time in private practice, that we were able to reflect, and I was able to encourage him that I, of all people, I am personally aware of why you do not rush these prosecutions. And the reason I'm personally aware of that is because all of these people charged or who were declared to be gang members if a gang is declared by the minister, will go and get a lawyer. And that lawyer, I always say, I assume that that lawyer will be at least as smart as I am and will look at the legislation, will look at the facts and evidence, and will advise their client and will fearlessly defend their client. The members of the Bahamas Bar will do that. So it is pointless to rush to do something unless you have faith that you have the evidence to satisfy the legal requirements. I remember under the FNM, they rushed out an anti-gang bill. They rushed to charge somebody, and the case failed miserably. And after that, we had quite a kinetic effort when people get to see you put in place an act, that doesn't work. That's worse than putting in place nothing. And so I am satisfied that the anti-gang and gun unit of the Royal Bahamas Police Force is being methodical and diligent in their pursuit of this matter. They have in fact gone to have international training, I think it's 3 times since we passed the act. We're not reinventing the wheel. This has happened elsewhere. We want to be successful. We don't just want to do something to say we've done something. And so we continue to proceed. I anticipate that the amendment that was requested should be entertained in the upcoming legislative session.
What's the statute?
What's the statute mean? Can you explain exactly what the amendment was?
It has to do with anonymity of witnesses.
And why, can you explain why that may have been important to bring up the anonymity, or why that's so pivotal if in this law, the statute?
Well, I guess it's not a secret. When you prosecute gangs, because everyone watches TV, eh? When you prosecute gangs, you do so by a number of methods. One of them is speaking to people in a gang. Well, clearly, if they have to stand up early and be exposed, that's problematic. Currently, the statute for the anonymity of witnesses covers murder as an offense, but it doesn't specifically cover gang activity. And so it's not that it's a new piece of legislation that is being sought. It's a natural progression to assist in the work. You're not going to be able to get people to, what the young people say, turn crown without a little bit of that, eh? So it's a natural progression. And as we work, we don't assume that we are rocket scientists, that we know everything. And that is why earlier, when I called on the F&M to provide information, that is very serious. And that is why I left the politics for later. But that is very serious. So this is an instance that in working through it, they saw the necessity for. And so we always encourage people to send forward their ideas, send forward their thoughts. We will receive them, we will consider them. This is something that affects all of us. I have family all over this country. I've had family members who have been murdered. I've had family members who have been robbed. I've had family members who have been raped. So there's no politics in this. So anyone with ideas can send them through. That, in my view, is a legitimate request. And I guess it's not speaking out of school to identify it, because it is something that I support that was requested.
And police investigating these cases under the anti-gang law, do you think that's one of the difficulties they've been having people coming forward to be a witness? If they knew they were going to be risk having their names out there, was that a difficulty they've had?
There are a number of difficulties. The police always have difficulties, and my call for people to assist is for people not assisting for any number of reasons. A pivotal problem with gang prosecutions in the Bahamas that the F&M learned painfully is if you and I are brothers, cousins, the fact of us associating together is not outside our social norm. And so you need a little bit more information than they live in the same house, they're always together, that sort of thing. While in large metropolitan countries, persons associating may be unnatural. Family members associating in the Bahamas is not unnatural. And so the police, and particularly the officer who now heads that unit, has the institutional knowledge of the failures of the past and they're building on it. A wise man learns from his mistakes, and that is what they're doing. And we sent them for a smart man learns from his mistakes. A wise man learns from the mistakes of others, and that's why we sent them for international training, to learn from the mistakes of people who've been doing this for a long time. Any further questions?
Is there any update with regards to the purchase of the fire trucks for the family islands throughout the country?
Yes. The Public Procurement Board, which is a part of that vaunted public procurement process, has approved the purchase. That I was notified of that this week. I signed off on the cabinet paper to hopefully make the cabinet agenda next week. A part of what has to accompany the purchase of the vehicles necessarily is the construction of fire sheds to accommodate those. So for instance, you don't want a ladder truck, as happened in Grand Bahama, where it may not be able to be accommodated in a shed. And so the Public Procurement Board was interested in knowing, and the financial secretary specifically, that we're not going to be spending money and leaving these things out in the element. And so you might have heard that there's a proposal to build a new fire shed in police headquarters. And we had a meeting over that, I think it was yesterday. And hopefully that will commence shortly to accommodate the apparatus that are going to be there, the men, because firemen sleep at their fire stations, and officers. And we've also, as you may know, recruited fire officers from the time we got in office. And in the current squad, there is an F squad of fire officers also in that squad. So while we're acquiring the equipment and looking at building the structures to protect them, we're also recruiting the manpower to man and operate the equipment.
How much are being purchased, and what's the final price tag?
I don't have that right with me. I know it was an annex to the cabinet paper, but that is information that we can certainly provide to you through the press office here. All right, if there are no other questions, thank you very much for your attention.
All right, I just want to thank Minister Monroe for that very comprehensive update. That brings our press briefing to a close. Have a good afternoon, everyone. Thank you.